Welcome back to Working on Exploring. This video is about the repair of my camper. When I built this thing, it's out of foam fiberglass and wood. I left some waterproofing undone, and that turned out to be very important. I had left a little pinhole and it created some major havoc. So you're going to come along to see taking this apart, see what the havoc has created, and see what it takes to repair this with some more wooden fiberglass and some body putty.
Solid chunk of something.
Originally built Maximus, I built it with the intention of having a completely fiberglass wrapped habitat. The way I constructed the corners required that I was going to put some aluminum curbing on them and then inject them with urethane foam in order to make them completely waterproof. Problem with that was I had wiring to put in them and I never foamed it. And that has caught up with me. I've had several different places where I've had some water penetration from the edge of the fiberglass into the habitat.
Oh wow. Look at that. So the good news, if there is any good news, is really that the water is really concentrated right here in the middle, and this is pretty soft.
That is corrosion aluminum oxide. So there's been a reaction in here between the aluminum and probably not just water, but look at all that. Yeah, I've got a real corrosion problem here, and I never imagined it. But there is now a solid chunk of something. This is just amazing. It's pretty obvious that this was the corner where it all started. You know, pretty devastating. Should have noticed it, didn't notice it. Not much I can say. And this is the problem that I find is after seeing all of the corrosion related swelling that disrupted the board on the outside, I have the same thing on the inside. I saw this earlier. So that aluminum tube runs right down through here, and all along it there's a big bump right here. There's a big bump right here where the two tubes meet right here, and it's and the fiberglass is loose on the wood all the way up to here. So I suspect that the wood inside of here has been damaged.
So there's good and bad news. Water came in right here from the outside. The tube, look at all that white powder. That aluminum oxide swelled up and pushed that piece of wood up there. I'm going to hold it. So what I think happened here is it got down in here. So it's loosened this wood here, but not very much. Just over here in the corner where it first came in. Right here around where the penetrations were for the spare tire were where it really developed a cancer here. And I'm questioning whether or not this was a reaction with the zinc plated bolts and the aluminum together. But this is swollen pretty well. We'll pull it apart and let it dry out and go back and fix it.
Now that the tear out is completed, it is time to restore the old walls back to a flat surface. Grinding and some sanding is done on the exposed walls, and Steve used a grinder to remove most of those wood chunks and staples. Once the exposed walls are cleaned up, he was able to cut and test fit his new plywood and get it ready for some glue. Key step before adding Bondo and fiberglass cloth is to coat the raw plywood with resin and let it cure. This is an important step when fiberglassing over wood and creates a bondable surface for applying the 6-ounce cloth to the walls.
As you can see, the resin is all lumpy. That is gelled when you leave it sitting in a cup, so that's all the heat of reaction to be concentrated. The heat reaction accelerates, curing, and all of a sudden you end up with whammo gelatin in about 30 seconds. Resin
The laminating resin I use is a polyester resin. It's unwaxed. Unwaxed is somewhat important. This may not be obvious. Most resin that you go buy, if you go to Home Depot and you buy a gallon of resin there, it's going to be waxed resin. In order for polyester resin to cure fully, it needs to have a barrier to oxygen. And so the reason why they put a little bit of wax inside of the resin is as the resin begins to set up, the wax floats to the surface and creates a wax coating on the surface of the resin when you're done to seal it off from air so it will cure. Well, the problem with that is you can't put more resin on top of it without sanding it off. So this is about, well, so this is a 32-ounce cup. Half is 16 ounces. I'm a little over 16 ounces. It takes about 10 milliliters of catalyst to catalyze that much resin. I'm going to run about 12 or so milliliters into this, which is going to make about a 1% catalyst ratio, which is pretty typical today. The temperature outside is about 70 degrees, which is kind of how you use your catalyst to adjust to temperature. If you're at 70 degrees, 1% catalyst is fine. If it's colder, you should probably go a little bit more than 1%. This morning I was using about 1.25% catalyst because we want the resin to cure a little more quickly and a little harder. And as the temperature gets hotter, you want to decrease your catalyst ever so slightly. And as you saw the last time, I actually over-catalyzed that resin, and that's why it gelled up on me too soon, was because it's warm enough where I didn't need to catalyze it to cure that quickly. If you look in this resin now, you'll see that it's kind of a brownish color, as opposed to when I first poured it in here, it was a pink color. And so as soon as the resin starts the polymerization of the polyester, it turns color. And that's a good sign to tell you that you can stop mixing right now. You need to make sure that you scrape the sides and the bottom of the cup. You need to scrape the stick off and make sure that there's no uncatalyzed resin right on the surface of the stick. And now we've got a tub full of catalyzed resin.
Once the resin coat has cured, all of the new to old transitions get smoothed out with Bondo and sanded. Then it's time to really waterproof all these joints.
About 1.25% catalyzed polyester resin here. It's 1.25% because it's only about 60 degrees out here, which is really not a very optimal environment in which to be doing fiberglass work. Okay, so I'm putting interleaved layers on here. So the last layer ended here, and so I'm matching it up with the last top layer. This is 6 inches wide to cover my about 2.5 inch thick edge there, so you can see the edge of it sticks up a little bit, and when it's hard I will grind that off. It's pretty easy to do, but most critical right now is getting it embedded in the interior radius here. So this is not just a square corner. This corner here, as you can see here, was filled with thickened resin, which is thickened with 1/8 inch milled glass fiber into a consistency of peanut butter, and then I spoon it into the groove and it will hang there vertically. It doesn't smooth out very well, but it's a lot cheaper than body filler. So once I get it hardened, then I take my die grinder and run the die grinder with a stone all the way around it to grind that nice concave shape to it. But that's it. That one's done. I'm pre-wetting small pieces. You know, ideally, in the perfect world, if this camper were upside down, I'd be using one single piece. I'd lay the single piece in there on top of a already wetted piece of wood, and then I'd saturate it all from one side of the material. This is 1708 fiberglass. This is 17 ounces of biaxial mat bounded to 8 ounces per square yard of chopped strand material. And obviously gloves are a must for doing this because you're going to get yourself all full of
resin, and I'm actually planning on it because putting these things up underneath of there is no way you can really handle the piece and then get it pressed into where you want it to be with tools. So this is all handwork. Okay, you can see about right here where the wet line and the dry line are. If this material is not wet, that pre-pregnated fiberglass is very hard to get on there. And it's okay, I'm just overlapping 1.5 inches or so, trying to make sure that this is all the way out past the top edge, but just ever so.
The exterior corners were covered with 1708 cloth, providing structural support without the concern of cosmetics. However, the interior wall joint steps are slightly different. To keep a smooth transition between the new back wall and the existing side wall, the process involved first filling the corner with putty, then sanding to a smooth radius. Then, using all 6-ounce fiberglass cloth, multiple layers are applied. First, a 6-inch strip was applied and cured, followed by a 4-inch strip, and then finally the full wall covering is applied, which overlapped the corner strips. Being a lighter material allowed Steve to then sand the edges and create a smooth transition at the wall.
So this, my resin is almost gelled. It's getting to the point where in another 30 seconds here I'm not going to be able to do anything. As you can see, Maximus behind me here has got his fresh coat of primer. We're winding down to the end of this repair project, and hopefully you're not interested in watching me paint and put the corner caps back on. So that's all it's about left. So just to kind of recap that this whole project was caused by me. I mean, I intended to waterproof the interior corners of this, but I was waiting around to get all the wiring in them because I was planning on foaming them full, and I couldn't add more wire after I'd foamed them. So bad decision on my part to choose foaming as my method of waterproofing. This time I've just fiberglassed it, and I can open them up and close them up again at will. Should have done that a long time ago. Didn't. You know, spent a week and a half repairing it. So hopefully this has been instructional. If you have any questions on fiberglass or on construction of a camper which made of wood, fiberglass, and foam, please don't hesitate to drop me a comment. I'm not perfect, so.